In the low country of South Carolina, the name Murdoch has been synonymous with criminal justice for close to a century. For generations, members of the family worked as the local Solicitor General in charge of all prosecutions. It was a powerful position, and the Murdochs were a powerful family. But on June 7th, 2021, the tables turned on the Murdochs as two members of the family, Paul and his mother Maggie, were murdered on their family's property. It was a crime that shook the community. Who would go after such a prominent family? Prosecutors say it's one of their own, Alec Murdaugh, Paul's father and Maggie's husband. They say he shot them both that night with two different weapons. Now Alec is on trial, and the jury is learning all the details of what was happening that night, just before and just after the murders. Tonight, we are live in the Low Country going through the text messages and phone activity by Alec, Maggie, and Paul, including the last video recorded on Paul's phone, which prosecutors say puts Alec at the scene of the crime at the time of the murders. I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us tonight here on Closing Arguments. We're live once again at Fat Jack's in Walterboro, South Carolina. This is the town hosting this huge trial. A lot of energy inside this room tonight as the crowds are growing inside the courtroom downtown. The crowds are growing here at Fat Jack's each and every night. Now, speaking of food, for those of you who may remember back in the day, there was a commercial by Wendy's which became iconic, and it was all about hamburgers and what's between the buns, and there was this tagline, "Where's the beef?" And that's something that I think some people have been saying in the first few days of the prosecution's case. Where's the beef? Where's the beef? Well, here's the beef, folks, and it was delivered inside the courtroom today through a lot of cell phone-related evidence. And prosecutors trying to put a timeline together, trying to place the defendant at the scene of the crime, at the time of the crime. This is the heart today, I believe the heart of the prosecution's case, and today was their biggest day. So, let me remind you about what we've seen in the build-up to this, which I think is important. We've seen the interviews with Alec Murdaugh, and in those interviews, he says he was taking a nap, right? He was taking a nap. He was with his family that night, they had dinner, and he took a nap, and then he was gonna go see his mom, and he texted Maggie on the way out, called her, whatever. Never once saying he was at the kennels. Never once saying he was at the place where Maggie was shot to death and his son Paul was shot to death. This is huge. He was taking a nap. That was his story to police the night of the double murders. Now, today, as I said, the beef was delivered. Cell phone video taken by Alec's son, Paul. And in the video, you don't see Alec Murdaugh, but you hear him. You hear his voice. And you see video of the dog, so it's obvious you're at the kennels. I mean, Paul Murdaugh is where he ends up getting murdered. You hear Maggie, and you hear another voice. The voice that everyone believes is Alec Murdaugh there at the scene. He never mentioned this to police. Never mentioned he was taking a nap. He was taking a nap. Now, I also want to take you back to opening statements because the defense was attacking the prosecution's timeline, saying the only way Alec Murdaugh could have done this was the only person who could have done this was Houdini. Houdini was the only one who could have pulled this off in this short of a time. Well, tonight I'm asking, who's Houdini now? Who but Houdini could be taking a nap and be at the kennels at the same time? That's a magic trick. Who could pull that off? Houdini? I mean, if I'm the prosecutor, I'm using that line in a closing argument to this jury. Because they did it in their opening, and it's stuck in my head and probably stuck in the juror's head as well. Like, how could Alec Murdoch be in two places at the same time? Well, they've got him on that video, his voice, and he says he's up at the house taking a snooze. Let me play it for you, okay? Listen closely, because you're going to hear voices, 3 different voices in this video. You're going to see some dogs. This, again, was recorded by Alec's son, Paul.
Get back. Get back. Quick, Cash. Come on. Quick. It's okay. Come here. It's not bad. Come here, Cash. Come here. Post it. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Bubba. Hey, Bubba.
It's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
This is the foundation of the prosecution's case. This is how they're building it. They're building it upon Alec Murdaugh's lie the night of the murders, where he was on his own property. Let me remind you what he said. He said he was taking a nap, but you just heard him. You heard his voice at the kennel with Maggie, with Paul, with the 2 victims. The defendant is with the 2 victims at the scene of the double murder. This is the same guy who told police he wasn't there. He was taking a nap. Listen.
I came home, Paul and I messed around. I was up at the house. I laid down, took a nap on the couch, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes. I got up, I called Maggie, didn't get an answer, and I left to go to my mom's.
That's the case. That's really the prosecution's case. I mean, they've got some other evidence. They're going to sprinkle it around. But that is it. That is it. Why would you lie about where you were the night your wife and son were murdered? It's because he didn't know there was a video. Let me bring in my guest. Joining me, Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter is with me here. Fat Jack's along with Matt Harris, host of the Murdoch Family Murders Impact of Influence podcast. Great to see you both today. Chanley, let me start with you. Reaction to this video. This is their case. This is their, from my perspective, I'm a former prosecutor. This is the case.
It's huge. It blows a hole in his alibi, Vinny. And this was played not once, but 3 times inside the courtroom today, reinforcing through prosecutors when this video took place and confirming by multiple witnesses that's Alec Murdaugh's voice. So the first time this was played, and we knew this was coming, everyone in the gallery knew this was coming. So when the prosecutor introduced it the first time, you could hear like a collective shifting of seats inside the courtroom because, Vinny, since you've been in there, they have a big screen now for the gallery for us to watch this evidence.
Oh, wow.
So we all turned to the screen and we watched the video unfold. I had my eyes on the family and on the jury taking it in. Of course, Alec Murdoch becomes emotional, hearing Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and then John Marvin in the gallery. When Maggie's voice says something about he has a chicken in his mouth or whatever it is, John Marvin laughs, kind of like, oh, you know, that's Maggie's voice, and looks over towards Buster. But what a moment. And again, 3 times this was played.
So, Matt, let's put this into context in terms of timeline. When is this video happening compared to when prosecutors believe the murder took place and when the murder could have taken place if, in fact, Alec Murdoch is the killer?
There's a very little window right there. So 8:45, 47, video's done. Paul has no action on his phone. Shortly thereafter, he gets a text at 8:49 that he doesn't respond to. And he's been talking to this girl the whole time. So it appears, and there's no steps on Paul's phone either. So at 8:49, something happens. 8:49 and some change. And so you're talking about 4 minutes, 3 minutes. 3 minutes by the time the video ends. And Paul seems to not use his phone, not walk, or whatever, anything.
So this video, prosecutors are saying, is like literally moments before Alec Murdaugh grabs a shotgun, shoots his son in the head and in the chest, and then hunts down his wife.
Yeah, because her phone goes dead shortly thereafter as well.
About 8 seconds after.
Yeah. You're listening to it, and there's like no indication that anything's wrong.
I think what's interesting, too, if you watch how it's filmed, or how he's using his phone, very, very possible Alec doesn't know he has a camera. When he's yelling, he's calling for his dog to come in.
His dog is Bubba.
Yeah, his dog is Bubba. So,
and Chandler, how about on cross-examination? What did the defense do with this today?
Well, the defense didn't really target it in the courtroom.
No.
In fact,
They kind of pretended like it wasn't there?
Right.
the one thing they did try, I noticed they tried to slide in there was when his buddy was, Paul's buddy was on the stand, they said, okay, how quickly could you drive from the kennel to the house? And he's like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 minutes. Look, if you drive really fast, if you drove really fast, and the guy's like, I bet you could do it in a minute or so. Which makes me think that their plan is to say, well, he was there, and he got his truck and sped home.
Bolted.
Right?
And then took a nap? was it a quick 5-minute power nap like I take before the show?
The gunshots didn't wake him up, apparently.
And the gunshots wouldn't...
And Alec didn't have his phone with him.
Right, no activity on his phone.
That's okay. This is so big. This is the case. But you know, sometimes it's difficult. We're going to talk about it in the second hour when we bring the lawyers in. Sometimes, I mean, Chandler's a lawyer too, but our analysts, it's tough to convict someone if you're just basing your case on a lie. Like the jury wants a little bit more. Sometimes it really depends. But let's get to more of these records of Paul, because I want to take a look at, and you alluded to it, Matt. Paul's cell, the text and the calls that he received. June 7th, 2021, Paul Murdoch begins having a text exchange with Megan Kimbrough. Megan messages him about movie recommendations, and Paul texts back and forth with her from 8:29 till about 8:30 and 15 seconds. Then beginning at 8:32, Paul starts having phone calls. He rejects one from Robert Boulay. I don't know who that is. Do we know who that is? Don't know who that is, not important. 8:40, he talks on the phone with his friend Rogan Gibson for 4 minutes and 14 seconds. That's a relatively big chunk of time in this window we're talking about. They hang up. Paul FaceTimes him at 8:44. That FaceTime call lasts about 11 seconds. Then Paul picks back up with his text message. You hear the noise in the background. Big night at Fat Jack's. A lot of birthdays being celebrated, so that's the noise that you hear. Paul picks back up the text message conversation with Megan, sends his last ever outgoing message at 8:48:05. So that's the last time for sure we know he's alive, right?
Yes. Right. Yes.
Okay. She responds, and Paul reads her message at 8:48:59.
That's the last time.
That's the last time we know he's alive. 36 seconds after reading her messages.
Well, if he read it.
If he read it, Rogan Gibson texts Paul. It goes unread. Then at 9:58:59, Rogan tries texting him again, but Paul's phone indicates he never read either of Rogan's messages. Okay, what more do we know about Paul's phone usage around this time?
You mentioned the 4-minute phone call with Rogan Gibson, who was on the stand today. In that phone call, Benny, he hears Alec in the background on the phone call during that 4 minutes. And when he was shown that video we just played, he confirms 100% Alec Murdaugh.
He remembers hearing him that night and also on the recording.
Yes.
Right, because he never got the recording. And he tried to FaceTime.
So the video was never sent?
Never sent. That's important, too. He tried, the FaceTime was going to show him the tail, but the reception's bad, so it was lagging. So he says, send me a video. So he hangs up, does the video, does not send said video.
And never sends it. So that, again, you're talking about, because he's shot. He can't send the video.
Because normally you'd send it right away, right?
You would.
You want a video? I take a video, I send it.
Right.
All of this, I mean, the case is strange, right? And it's hard to fathom a father doing this to a son. It just doesn't make sense, but you know, we're putting these pieces together the way the prosecution's painting the picture. Matt Harris, Chanley Painter staying with us, obviously. We're live at Fat Jack's. When we come back, we're going to take a look at another cell phone. This is the beef of the case, folks. This is the beef. Maggie's cell phone. What did it say? What was going on? What were the movements of the phone? We'll break it all down when we come back. Life of Alec Murdaugh is bizarre. It is complicated.
This great South Carolina attorney is charged with the murders of his own wife and son.
Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Who exactly is this guy?
The evidence is going to show that he was there.
He is innocent.
Who knows where this thing is going to end?
This case needs to be resolved. We need to put this behind us and move on.
Murdoch Family Murders. Live coverage weekday mornings only on Court TV.
I will say that a key piece of forensic evidence that you're going to hear in this case is the cell phone evidence. Alec's cell phone, Maggie's cell phone, Paul's cell phone. You're going to hear evidence again that the defendant said he was never at those kennels, that he was napping at 8:44 and 55 seconds. Paul recorded a video. And on that video, you'll see that video, and you'll hear from witnesses that identify Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and Alec's voice. Just over 3 minutes later, Paul's phone locks forever.
Crucial part of the case. Big day inside the courtroom here in Walterboro, South Carolina. Welcome back, folks. We're live at Fat Jack's. Big crowd on hand today. Big crowd inside the courtroom today. And tonight we're talking about the cell phone data, the cell phone testimony. Take a listen here to David Dove, who testified today about Maggie's cell phone. Alec Murdaugh's wife, who prosecutors say he hunted down, shot, and killed after he killed his son. Let's watch.
If we turn to the very last orientation change, you see that it has date recorded 9:06 and 22 seconds?
Yes, sir, I do.
And that's on June 7th?
Yes, sir, it is.
Is that the last orientation change before the phone was recovered by law enforcement the next day?
According to what I looked at, that's the last one I saw.
So the start time for an orientation change, what does that mean?
It's when it started to record that the orientation change was happening.
Okay, and then I see the end time would be when it ended 8 seconds later, correct?
Yes, sir.
What does that mean for an orientation change to take 8 seconds?
That it was in that position.
So is it taking 8 seconds to go from portrait to landscape?
No, sir. It's recording that it was in that. It did not show that it changed. If it's in portrait, it didn't show that it changed from portrait to landscape or from landscape to portrait. It shows it was in that position for that period of time.
Okay. So, and then over here, this number, there's numbers that are 0 and 1. 0 would be landscape and 1 would be portrait, correct?
Yes, sir, correct.
Okay. So we have here, this is the last orientation change before it's recovered, and we have a start time and an end time of 12 seconds to 20 seconds.
Yes, sir.
And do you recall that there was an incoming phone call in that time period?
Yes, sir. There were incoming phone calls around the 9:04, 9:05, and I think at 9:08 also, or a text message around then.
Do you recall that there was a phone call between 9:06 and 12 seconds and 9:06 and 20 seconds?
Yes, sir, I believe there was.
And who was that call from?
It was from Alex Murdoch.
Maggie's phone, significant, important, and it's amazing the type of information and data they can retrieve. Who knew that every time we tilted our phone, somebody's watching and is recording all that data? I mean, it's not great for privacy, but it's great for investigators to try to figure out what's happening. All right, let's bring back in Chanley Painter, Court TV legal correspondent Matt Harris, host of the Murdoch Family Murders. Impact of Influence podcast. Chanley, break down more of this information that we learned about Maggie's phone and timeline and everything else that was happening.
It's kind of like putting a puzzle together all the time that were important. And like you said, it was like orientation, like we just showed, when maybe someone's holding the phone and it turns this way or that way. Well, they can register a lot of that information. Now, her phone, remember Paul's phone locked 8:49 and some seconds? Well, Maggie's locked for the final time, just a few seconds after his, Vinny. So prosecutors pointing out some of the movements of her phone after they say she's dead. Here's some of that, Vinny. At 8:53, they mark an interaction with Siri. Not sure what that means. 8:54 p.m., the phone camera was activated, like possibly the perpetrator picking it up. It doesn't recognize that person's face to unlock it. That's what the witness said. 8:55, the display turns off on her phone. At 9:04, phone call from Alec. 9:06, her phone again changing orientation, portrait to landscape. 9:06, final call from Alec Murdoch. And then 2 minutes later, a text from Alec saying, going to check on his mom, be right back. And then 9:47, Alec text again saying, call me, babe.
Babe, that's interesting.
Interesting. What we learned, Vinny, is none of the previous information from her phone. Alex wasn't calling or really texting her till these at 9:00.
Right. So, all right. So, Matt, give us a little more context here. What do we think the prosecution is trying to tell this jury through this evidence, and what story it tells?
They, at one point, the defense had me going a little bit because they talked about that orientation thing that 9:06-ish happened when Alec would have been in the car. And so the defense was saying that's when he threw it out the window, whatever, right? But he couldn't do it if he was over there, if he was just getting in his car. Well, when they on redirect, they come back and they say, but if the phone is not lit up, if it's not turned on, or you can't see the screen, you can throw it, it will not tell you whether it was thrown or not. So that 9:06 was just somebody doing this. Alec could have thrown it after he got in the car. You see what I'm saying?
Whoa. This is huge, folks. This is huge. Time out here. Because the defense is creating their own timeline, right?
Right.
And they want the phone tossed at 9:06.
Exactly.
That's the Houdini, right? Because Alec is in his car on his property. The phone is not near the property.
How could I throw it?
He couldn't throw it unless he threw it half a mile.
Right. Well, the expert says that as long as the screen is not turned on, it won't record if it's or won't register whether it was redirected or orientating to a certain size. So therefore, he could have been doing this. In fact, the timeline lines up when he gets in the car. He calls around that 9:06 time. It lights up, so he has to see, right? And then it turns off, drives down the road, throws it. It would never know. That is what the plan is there.
That's fascinating. So you put this evidence together. Now, take us inside the courtroom. Like, you guys are breaking it down amazingly, but it takes a while for this evidence to come out inside the courtroom.
It does.
Do you get the sense the jury is getting it, or does the prosecution really have to bring it together in the closing argument?
In fact, there was one moment a juror interrupted court because he couldn't see what the defense was referring to well enough. He wanted it to be blown up more on the screen so he could see the time, what was sent, and when it was sent. So they are very much paying attention. And one of those points on cross-examination of this expert was that Alex's phone is registering no steps, no movement at a time when Maggie's was. So how could he have picked her phone up but not his at the same time? So they got this expert to agree that it would be reasonable that different people had the phones after she's deceased. And I think we have a soundbite from the testimony. Let's watch.
If he walked from 9:02 until the second before he gets in the car and cranks it, and that is, it looks like 30 seconds after the phone is thrown on the side of the road a half mile away, can he be in two places at once?
I don't know that's the time the phone was thrown. I know that's the time the orientation change occurred.
That would be unusual, wouldn't it? That you could throw it from a moving car, it could land 15 feet in the woods, and not ever bounce, not once, in a way that would cause an orientation change.
I've never tested throwing a phone out the window to see what the orientation change looks like. Like I said, I can just testify to what is in the records on it.
It would be reasonable that if somebody had taken the phone, they see it starts to ring with his name on it, They might chuck it out the window.
It is possible if they see that, yes, sir.
That would be consistent with all the information on the cell phones, would it not?
It's consistent, the information on the cell phones, whether somebody who saw the number coming in or they even saw the number coming in, I can't say because I was not there.
The question is really, your review of these records, is that not just consistent, but reasonably consistent, something that would make sense to you, that is one reasonable possibility consistent with what you see on these phones?
If somebody was holding the phone and they saw a number come in, they didn't want to answer or didn't want, then to throw it, that is a possibility, yes, sir.
Well, at that time, he's walking, isn't he? He's not in a car.
The phone recorded steps in the time frame.
So he's not in a car at that time?
I can't say where he was or wasn't. I wasn't there. I can just say what the phone recorded, whether it recorded steps or not.
The person in possession of his phone was not in the car at that time, 9:06 and 12 seconds.
I can just say the phone, that somebody had the phone and it recorded steps.
He's also calling his wife in this time period.
Yes, sir, there are phone calls.
He's walking and calling his wife, and his car is about to crank a second after he stops walking, which really does seem like he's getting into the car.
That's what it would appear with the times, but like I said, all I can testify to is what the information is on the devices.
And we've previously established that his phone and Maggie's phone were not, when he's walking, they're not walking together. Is that correct?
Correct. There are no steps recorded on the devices together.
In your 20-some years experience in law enforcement, that doesn't make it seem reasonable to you that that the person who had Alex's phone did not also have Maggie's phone at 9:06 and 12 seconds?
It appears the phones were not together being moved by the same person because they were not recording steps.
Okay, let me get this straight. So when his phone is showing someone walking in steps, hers is not. And when hers is, his is not. So they're not in sync. So if I had two phones, they would be in sync if I was carrying two phones.
Right.
But they're not in sync.
Well, that's because Alec doesn't have his phone, probably. His steps don't start till 9:02. Her phone is moving 8:53 to 8:55. He doesn't start walking to 9:02. So he could have one phone and not his phone. Yeah, they don't sign up because he doesn't have his phone.
Yeah, that's...
Because his phone was...
That's good for the defense.